start by saying that, to curate any kind of exhibition is almost like falling in this rabbit hole. Like curators come to any subject full of curiosity. This is the first thing that sparks our attention and say, like, oh, how can we do this? In our case, with Thomas and me, when we start this biennial, the first ever type of this biennial would be collective minds. So Thomas had this idea of looking to, deeper into collections and meanings, how we collect, why we collect, and we did all this research. And then we ended up shifting to a broader subject to talk about information, and of course the information crisis and fake news and all this, that's super topical issues right now, and it's super relatable to knowledge. We learned about this relationship also in the journey, on the way. We didn't know that before, and it was when we, of course, stumbled in this pyramid, this diagram that you guys see all around, and this is framing, like this is the framework we use in this biennial. For me, I was very intrigued as well for the theme crisis and what we define as crisis. And designers always try to fix stuff. Like this is our mind, we see something and we try to find better solutions, at least in our point of view. And so, like, to understand the crisis, where it is broken, or I try to understand this word first, and this led me to philosophy. So I read a lot about people studying philosophy of information, epistemology, that is philosophy of knowledge, nothing to do with design. So I was quite lost how to connect this to bring it back to design. But in any case, I would like to share with you some notes just in the beginning, just to say what was this crisis. Some people say, like Luciano Floridi, we are exhibiting his book actually there, called The Fourth Revolution. This book is exhibited in our first room, Information Crisis. And he talks that we are living now in the fourth revolution. And if we are in the fourth revolution, we had three before. And then I was trying to understand that. It's like, well, so we had four information revolutions, and this is not the true, So we have fourth revolution, what he's calling is when we get to this point of big shifts in society that actually change our behavior and also change how we see each other, our role in society. So just to share with you, because this is super curious to me, the first revolution is considered the studies of Copernicus, when he shared with the world that we were not the center of the universe, it was actually the sun. And so the Earth and other planets were rotating around the sun, so we are not the center of the universe anymore. The second revolution was actually from Darwin, and then that we understood that we're not the most important animals in the animal kingdom, like we all species of life evolved. This is through natural selection, and this idea changed everything, how we see each other in the world. The third one comes with Freud, because even with Darwin, people said, okay, we are not, like all animals and all living things came from the same root, but we are the only ones who have command of how we think, and we're rational beings and all that. And then came the studies of Freud, and actually what they say is like, we are rational beings, but there's so much more going on in our minds that we have no control. And this comes with the subconscious and emotional, and all the psychoanalysis studies, and this also changed the perception of who we are in society. And now we live in the fourth revolution, and this is with information. It's called, and they place this like when it started, so with the starting of computing, and this is with Alan Turing. And then this is how Luciano Floridi talks about this fourth revolution. And now the way we see ourselves in society changed again, because we see ourselves as info orgs, so information organisms. We all have like online and offline lives. Like we are very used to say in real life, and what's not in real life, so virtual life in real life. And we are developing these personas and we're changing our behaviors and how we understand ourselves. So this is a more philosophical approach. So instead of calling crisis, he's calling revolution. And if we start to say that this is a revolution that starts with Alan Turing, and later on to have like personal computers at home, this is like mid-90s. So it seems was 25 years into this mess. So I think it would take at least another 25 years for us to figure out, how to process all of this that we're getting now. So this is one approach. The other approach that I thought super interesting was actually talking about these revolutions in terms of more social and economic change and methods of production. And then for this comes actually three big shifts. And the first one is agriculture and the control we have of the environment, and so we can harvest our own food and control the environment. The second one would be industrialization, and then of course this is where it comes design. And this is how also we make our living. So we start producing objects and selling, and then there's all this mechanization of structures and everything. And now it's what we call, again, like the information revolution, and called the knowledge society. And most of us in this room right now, our work is just we sell knowledge and services, and that's why under this other perspective, this is how they see it. So it's not four, but three ways that's shifting how we are making our living. There's just one more that's with the communication technologies, and this also changes a lot. The first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the invention of the printing press with Gutenberg. And there's one book called From Gutenberg to Google that talks about all this history from changes in how we, knowledge is distributed, information is distributed. So you see, like with the printing press, there was also a lot of confusion that now we have more information available, and the books will be all like very shallow because people don't care, nobody's writing it by hand anymore. So how is this going? And actually for society what it means is that knowledge became super democratic, and more people could get access to it because it was not so expensive anymore. So suddenly we have cheap books. After that comes the advent of the press, right? And then comes newspaper. And with newspaper, we have daily news, which means like it's very ephemeral, can be fast. This, before the printing press, of course, was not possible for people to be writing by hand what happened the day before. After that, of course, is the advent of electricity, and then we have the telegraph and radio. And so this is what happened, and also the invention of the railroad. And there is they're saying this other timeline, that when we have this, we have the end of distance. Suddenly, you don't need to go to another place to take your message or to get the message. There's no need for the postman anymore. So we have the telegraph. And so all this is grouping together: telegraph, telephone, the radio, and then suddenly you have news at home from the broadcast, and then television. This is all under the same thing. And now with the global society, then we have internet and Wi-Fi, and this is more than the end of distance. This is also the end of time. Everything is instant, and we get communication and image transported from one place to another in milliseconds. And this is of course changing everything, how we communicate, where we live. Like it's so easy to see. Now we listen to people saying, "I'm based in São Paulo and Berlin." Like, how come? Like you're based in two continents at the same time, and we don't even question this anymore. So there's a huge shift going on, and for me, like I think it's a good introduction just to understand our how this can lead to various different disciplines. We're talking about here economic, we talk about philosophy, and also the theory of communication technologies. And if you think about design, it has a crossover with all these disciplines, and make sure it works. Questioning this here at the exhibition as well. But I think for now, for our introduction is more than fine. So you're in the right framework, mindset to start our talk with Amelie and Deyan.
Thank you, Aline. You see, we're tied together with this mic, not just through the process of the biennial, our shared knowledge. We also have here our shared microphone. So, thank you, Aline, again to putting everything kind of together in a nutshell, or when we went through this process of developing Bio 26, which also for us, of course, coming from the design field, is it's a big question that we not evolve or develop or give answers ourselves. I think it's more a process of dialogue and discussing and questioning things. And how better could you do this than inviting your friends to collaborate in such a project and or colleagues, let's say, to discuss this. So I would like to invite our first panel guest to the front. There is Amelie Klein. Yes, and Deyan, Sudjic. So very briefly, I think I don't have to tell too much about the backgrounds of these two amazing design people. Amelie tackled huge topics with her world traveling exhibitions with the Visual Design Museum. Questions like design in the global south, Africa, making Africa, the exhibition, but also a collaborative project we did together on Hello Robot. How does AI and bots change the relation between men and humans, with humans and machines? And recently, design. Recently.
I've seen that shirt.
Well, I write it down. Then there is lately design in politics. I think a long-lasting or an exhibition that we're waiting for to see on Victor Papanek. And Deyan, who is with the Design Museum in London since 2006, I think to pretty much also give it the status that it has today. Also to shift from Butler's Wharf to South Kensington, the new premises. So and soon to be the director emeritus. Yeah, correctly speaking. So I think that's the time that you can do things you're really looking for. We had, of course, Deyan and Amelie are two out of an advisory committee that we invited to rethink or also to look at the projects we invited for Bio 26. And I think I would like to start because Deyan also contributed to the first issue of our Bio magazine, which when it's finished becomes a catalog. But in his catalog, in his article, he also refers a lot, he refers a lot to Victor Papanek's thinking of the late 60s, early 70s, and I think that's also a subject that obviously kind of brings you together or relates you in a way. That was a time also of immense crisis, so that was a reaction to how can design contribute to various situations, whether it's oil, war, whatsoever. And as Aline also introduced, is that since industrialization, design always has been kind of not an answer, but also a catalyst of dealing with all kinds of transitions, shifts, and crises in a way. Could you, Deyan, maybe because you gave also a very nice overview, where we are today in designing, in the so-called post-truth era, and how did we get there in a way through decades of designing.
In 24 characters. Just listening to you talking about the
for eras. It seems sometimes that this word crisis is always there. And is this a different kind of crisis? Is it a more extreme kind of crisis? Has something really changed? Or does human life really revolve around the same kind of thing? So, people have always moved around the world. If you go to the ancient Greek and Roman cities around the Mediterranean, they were full of migrants. Culture travel around the world. People have always been anxious about death. They try and make monuments to show that they've existed. People are worried about the future and change. So in the 18th century, French textile workers smashed the machines that were getting them out of jobs. It's not happened to artificial intelligence yet. So on one level, you might think that in fact, we're always wrestling with the same kind of problems in different forms. And looking at the exhibition here, I sort of see that. I think there's something very witty about showing Otto-Eickert's pictograms next to the rather more explicit pictograms helping refugees understand how to deal with the lavatory in Vienna. I think there's something fascinating about the way that Papanek has resurfaced. When I was a student, one would read that book and it seemed like sensationalist and naive, to suggest that there are a few, as he begins the book famously by saying that there are a few professions more dangerous than industrial design, but not many, which then seems preposterous, but now seems actually, if you look at Forma Phantasma's exhibit or strings here, you see how difficult designers make it to take machines apart and how difficult they are in the way that they use scarce materials and so on. So maybe the problems don't change, but they just move faster. I'm fascinated by the proposal from Dunham Raby for, it's 2015 they invented it, but they invented a new design school which only offers one master's program, an MA in constructed realities, which is a marvelous idea in which they're proposing what's really happened, that those categories of craft technique, of visual communications, the way that we always used to teach design, have now been surpassed by something very different, and something about ideas and speculation, which I suppose gets us back to really the notion of critical design, which is so much of what is here. And again, one could think that William Morris was the first critical designer, a revolutionary socialist wallpaper designer who believed in the emancipation of women, of colonialism. He believed in changing the world. He believed in an anarchic society in which people would manage themselves, in which money became irrelevant, and yet he still designed objects. And he designed objects which he knew were not within the reach of the working class who he was championing, but he made them anyway, which you could say was a kind of speculation, a kind of critical design. I think I was asked in my contribution to the catalogue book, artwork, to talk really about, is it possible to be optimistic? And there is a sense that design has to, in some sense, carry that sense of optimism that whatever the designer does is in some ways an attempt to change the world, and that needs to be optimistic. But this is a tough time to be optimistic in. And I think that Forma Phantasma put it very well, echoing maybe Paolo Antonelli, who did the Biennale show at Milan last year, in which they sort of think, well, probably this species, we're not going to make it, but we might as well live life as well as we can, as elegantly as possible on the way out.
I don't know if that's optimistic. I remember talking to Paolo about this, and he's like, okay, so we just have to plan a better ending for us. I think this is just not optimistic yet, not for me. Amelie, I would like to ask you questions too on the Victor Papanek idea, since you just did this show last year. And it's talking about, design as strategies, because this is what he offered, design for a better world. And in times of crisis like we are, and this shows this is also the politics of design. So can you just give us a few words of this? Or, you know, I think we have one word by Victor Bachmanek here with the tin can radio, for example. What kind of strategies he was devising at that time, you know, as Thomas said, like at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, where also there was this anxiety in the air with the Vietnamese War, the Vietnam War, and so on. So I wonder if you could talk about a little bit of design as strategies to go into the crisis.
Well, Victor Papanek repeated one message basically all through his life. And I bow in facing this consistency. He repeatedly said, design is not mute, you know, it is not neutral. You cannot design within like a vacuum. You will always, everything has consequences. Whatever you do, whatever decision you take as a designer, as a human, will have consequences. And I think this is something that many people and many designers are not aware of, how political their profession actually is. So anything that goes into design has an implication, has a consequence. And most often, designers don't think about these consequences. You know, they go and work for Google because it's cool, and they have great, you know, belly bath, we call it, you know, the ball bath and diving. But on the other side, you design products that will be used by millions and millions of people, and that harm and disrespect their privacy, for example. How can you do that? I don't get it. How can you do that with, you know, look into the mirror every day in the morning and be cool? I think this is very problematic.
So I will you continue with the mic, because it's also, now it's about your contribution to the magazine. Each advisor was asked to put their thoughts and paper for us, contributing articles for our magazines in different topics that they found interesting in our biennial. And Amelie delved deeper into the concept of fake news and post-truth. I also was a bit, upset with this concept of this post-truth. I don't get it. After truth is what lies for me. Then I got this nice little book called Post-Truth for Dummies, and I want to read a little bit for you, just one paragraph of this. What does it mean? And it does not mean just lies, or it does not mean political propaganda, because I thought also, because this whole idea of fake news, there is a political agenda behind it, of course, but it's not, they're not the same. So I'll just read because, it's better than what I remember. So they say, for people, there's something that we have to respect truth to begin with. If people for them, truth does not matter, or there are people who think that there's no such thing as truth because everything is relative. So this author says, so there's nothing to do about it. So there's not much help. We cannot teach these people what truth is. It's a philosophy of life. But for those of us who believe, so he explained the post-truth phenomenon as, and he used an Oxford dictionary definition. And I'll read this. So he said, if one looks at the Oxford definition and how all of this has played out in recent public debate, one gets the sense that the post-truth is not so much a claim that truth does not exist, as that facts are actually subordinate to our political point of view. So it's basically saying that, we just believe what we want. So we choose the things we want to believe according to our own political agenda or interpretations. And so there's one example here that I like, that is it's not simply that the climate change deniers don't believe in facts, it's that they only want to accept those facts that justify their ideology. So it's a lot about ideology as well, and that's why we are getting to a point in the post-truth era that facts are not unbiased, because this is something that we always, as journalists and scientists, try to say, like, I'm talking about facts, so you cannot question facts. And now in the post-truth era, which is a big problem in the information crisis, is that actually you can question facts, and they're not unbiased. And Amelie wrote a beautiful article about this, full of great examples. And the title of her article is called Facts Don't Matter Anymore. So please give us your insight, because you did a much bigger research than I did in this subject, so enlighten us.
Enlighten us. So my research suggests that so people, that there's a lot of research, scientific research and evidence that people tend to believe what they believed previously. So anything that goes against something that all of us believe, we tend not to believe it. We tend not to believe what other people, or we tend to believe what other people claim, even if in doubt. So if I say, oh, well, there's a lot of green in here, and Thomas says, no, there's not green at all, and you say it, when you say too, I might think, oh, well, maybe my eyes, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I don't see well, and I'm inclined to agree with them, although I'm in doubt. People tend to believe what their peers believe, which makes facts, or which makes truth no longer a result or a consequence of evidence, and before evidence comes facts, whatever a fact is, but truth becomes a consequence of a very deep and human need for social belonging. So ultimately, what we tend to believe reflects who we are much more than what is around us, and who we want to belong to and who we do not want to belong to. So the interesting thing is, for example, the Washington Post once titled, Trump believers don't believe his wildest promises, and they don't even care. Now that sounds really awkward, but they don't. They just don't care, because it doesn't matter. To them what matters is that Trump makes a bold statement against people that they hate, and that Trump hates, obviously. The liberal, democratic, educated elites, international elites that do not care for people like them. And so truth becomes this expression of who I am, who I want to be, and who I want to be associated with. And I think if we understand this, we can change our we can change our efforts to prove.
Is this a new phenomenon?
No, not at all. No. It's not.
This has been the case for centuries.
Absolutely. What's changed, obviously, is the media technology that we're using, to promote these.
But 500 years ago, people burned witches. It was just as painful, just as difficult. It was, why is it? What is different now about how life was lived then?
But the difference between when we burned witches and now is that in the meantime we had enlightenment, and so rather than absolutist monarchs or God as a final, as a period to any discussion, as a final argument for any discussion, we had evidence. That is a change. But now I think we're at a point where we have to. That's the first sentence of my essay. We have to say farewell to evidence. To reason. Reason is not. It has left us.
Enlightenment's being challenged by people from all over the political spectrum. I mean, the Marxist interpretation of facts is also one of the reasons that we believe that facts have become relative is that both left and right assaulted this view of the world.
I agree. I mean, initially it was more of a center-left position to question, the big narratives, postmodernism, etc. And now it has been co-opted by the right, which is somewhat ironic. But I think, rather than lamenting rather than lamenting that the evolution as this new phenomenon, I think what makes more sense is to react to it in an appropriate way. And I think presenting more evidence and more evidence and more evidence is just not successful. As we can see, it does not help to confront Mr. Trump with, I think, 12,000 something lies and incorrectnesses. It doesn't, nobody cares. And so let's react differently. And what could this different reaction be? And I think, and this is something that I heard this morning from Katarina Bandru, who is somewhere here, who did the project at the retirement home with a handful of very ambitious women. There are two things. One is speculation. So what could be? What potential do we have? And the other thing is experiential knowledge. So, as you know, in the moment when it's true, I cannot know whether this video is actually true or whether it's a deep fake video. So I do not know, because technology has become so good that it's true that I have to doubt the truth in it. So as long as I'm confronted with such technology, the only safe haven, if you want, is my own personal experience. And I think there's a lot of potential in this. So,
yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you also, to bring it back to design. What actually, what are the proposals, or what is, you pointed out, where design needs to look at or go to in terms of, giving this kind of real life experiences. Maybe you can talk about this. What does this actually mean for designers? What to address and how?
There's one really great example by Superflux, who's also a design collective that is also part of the exhibition, and they were commissioned by the United Arab Emirates Energy Ministry to come up with an idea for the future city and the future energy consumption, future energy lab is what they call it. And so they came up with 5 scenarios, 5 different city models. One of them being, a car-free city. And obviously the sheikhs said, forget it, it's not going to happen, because our sons, our great sons, they will never give up their cars, their individual private cars, fossil fuel, etc. And then they had another city model that was business as usual. And each and every one of those city models came with a couple of props and design propositions. And the business as usual model came with these air samples. So that air samples from 2023, 2033, something like that. And they just let the sheikhs sniff. And what's interesting is this was not just made up. It was based on research. It was a collaboration with scientists who sampled, who made these air samples. And it was so toxic that the next day the Prime Minister tweeted, "Brothers and sisters, we have a new energy policy," which is great. And of course it helps if you collaborate with an authoritarian, if you work for an authoritarian regime where you only have to convince a few people. But this one sniff was so effective, so much more effective than any evidence, any statistics, any argument could be. And I think this is really interesting. This is knowledge that we all have deeply within us. We don't need to argue. If the air that we will probably, and again, this is only a suggestion, a proposition, that we probably, potentially, sniff and breathe if we go on as we do now. Well, I think that's pretty convincing. This is a type of design that I'm talking about, and I'm very excited about it lately. But it's not yet thought through, I have to admit. But I think there is something in there that's really, really valuable and important for design.
Within this biennial, the term that we are also investigating or looking at is common knowledge, which common in our sense in the commons, which also within design practices like Super Studio, this is kind of a multidisciplinary approach, also working on this kind of speculative project. Deyan, you also mentioned in your essay, so this is where design shifted. Design is not a cosmetic afterthought. It is a way of looking at the world from multiple perspectives. How do you, also now to give a bit of a vision, an optimistic outlook, what does this mean in design practice?
So last month I organised a conference in Milan for Italian trade organisation, and we had 4 topics, one of which was mobility. And on this panel I invited Philip Roeder, who runs the city's unit, London School of Economics, who did the usual presentation that our world looks at, of looking at the bus lanes in Gruceva, looking at the use of bicycles, and on the same panel I had the head of design from Fiat. And these people are never ever in the same room together, and they look so different, actually both Germans, interesting, and I think just trying to get that kind of dialogue can really work, and that's where design can have a real strength, that all the things that really matter to us, the complicated problems, information is one clearly, but if we're thinking about the world, the fact that our society is getting older, these are all problems which are not solved by any one group of people approaches. Aging is not only a medical problem, it's not only for doctors, it's not only for the insurance industry, it's not just for social security, it's not just for architects who design houses or product developers that design things that burn people's hands. Of course it's all of these views, but it's so rare that dialogue can take place, and that for me is the absolute nature of design, that it's a method for taking multiple perspectives. Design is about observing behaviors, it's exploring how things are made and disposed of. It's a rounded picture, and that's why I think design does have a future and a purpose, that it has this remarkable ability to shuffle its view of what is actually significant to it and become something else, but always the same method.
Thank you, Deyan. That was also, thank you very much. I think this also actually by now big applause also for the two of you in supporting Bio 26 with your knowledge and support in also selecting the project that we have exhibited, or that are exhibited in the show and with the commission project. Thank you very much, the two of you.
I think common knowledge is best, the phrase is best used and to refer to an ideal, which is spreading knowledge as widely as possible. I think that some knowledge is more common, that is more widely spread, more widely shared than others, but there isn't one fixed body of common knowledge. There are simply attempts to spread and also attempts to restrict. I see 3 big obstacles, of which one is economic, and it's the problem, because it's not only keeping knowledge private, there are even attempts to make common knowledge private by patenting something that was already circulating. And secondly, governments either by negatively censoring knowledge or by building up secret data banks. And finally, this is less visible, but it's also important, this process of division of labour, increased specialisation, which means less and less communication between the different kinds of expert. Nobody seeing the whole picture. So the human race knowing more than ever before in history, but individuals finding it more difficult, not less, to see the picture as a whole. I can't imagine a knowledge world without experts, but they can be more or less open to interaction with other people. They can be more or less specialized or talk to one another. So then there are different scenarios, and they can be more or less arrogant, and they can be more or less involved in politics. But I don't think they're not going to disappear. I think the role of experts continues to be great, and after all, citizen science is basically a way of assisting the experts. Well, there is a danger that it could have a monopoly, though it doesn't altogether, because there are different search engines, and again, it's digitizing books, but then there are rival enterprises digitizing books. Some of them definitely mean not to charge. One always suspects that Google is digitizing books so that at some later point in the future it might charge for access, and that would be, so if it had a monopoly, that would be very dangerous. I think knowledge monopolies have always been dangerous. Knowledge, in a situation where there's more and more information, the problem of information overload, then knowledge management becomes a more and more important function, as indeed many businesses have discovered, and this is why they appoint chief knowledge officers and so on. In fact, the role is quite an old one. In the 17th century, I think, some intellectuals from Francis Bacon to Gottfried Leibniz, besides their personal achievements, they took on the role of knowledge managers. They wanted to put scholars in touch with one another and so on. And that role has become more and more important. As the world of knowledge expands, then it's harder and harder to see it as a whole, or even to see where you are located in it. So you need this kind of help. I even think that in schools, children should be taught how to manage knowledge. Because when they become adults, it's in this world of information overload. So they have to be taught some kind of discrimination, they have to be taught some kind of criticism so that they don't just believe what they found on the internet. It would be nice to have total transparency in government, which it's never happened. And maybe it would be nice if all spies were successful, so that would mean that state secrets were actually no longer secret. But I can still think of situations and very delicate diplomatic negotiations. If the journalists know about it before an agreement is reached, making certain information public can actually stop the agreement taking place. So I think an element of temporary secrecy is going to be needed. But I don't think we need the FBI to have a billion files which are, despite the Freedom of Information Act in the United States, quite inaccessible outside the agency. So for the most part, yes, I am in favour of the barriers coming down, just not quite all of them. Yes, I have to admit I have slightly mixed feelings, because if you write a book, it's a lot of work, and maybe it's good to have some kind of reward as an incentive. But on the other hand, as a consumer of knowledge, I'm very much in favour of as much sharing as possible. And it's surely possible to arrive at some kind of compromise, so that, yes, when you first publish a book, you get some kind of fee, but it doesn't. But it's a flexible copyright, so that, and especially after a few years, it becomes more and more open access will be available. I don't see. Of course, it's very nice. I'm still getting royalties from books that I published 40 years ago, but it's so long after the work. I'm not really sure that the money is welcome, but I don't really feel entitled to it anymore. So I certainly wouldn't oppose attempts to weaken copyright in that respect. The ideal of treating knowledge as a common good is actually, I think, nearer now than it was in the past. In that way, I am, despite the threats of privatizing knowledge by big corporations, despite the threats by governments to censor knowledge, think of the Great Firewall of China as has been brought into existence to fight the internet. Despite all that, I think, yeah, we are nearer the ideal of common knowledge than before.
Thank you, Peter Berg. We cannot integrate him in the discussion now, but we will drive on some of his thoughts. Sorry?
Bring our mic back.
Yes, I do.
Yes, so now for the second round, we are talking about knowledge, common knowledge, and I would like to invite other guests. Please come to the front, Maya, Rajan, Amelie, and Aljoša. Please come here. Yes, please sit. I will have another chair. Yes, I'll talk briefly about why we chose these three guys to come talk to us today. They've been part of BIO before. Maya Raja works here at MAU, at the museum. She's a curator here. And I think this might be your third or fourth biennial. Paulo is, in this biennial, he's a design mentor. He worked with the Museum Challenge. But you were also part of BIO before, not the last one, the BIO 50, and also Aljoša was part of BIO 50. So it's always interesting to talk and also understand. I mean, they are, of course, our hardest judges because they know what it was before and how we are doing now. If we match the process, if we make it better. So, of course, people who saw it before will be the best to tell us how we did. But in this case, what we want is actually for them to share either how it was, has the history, like Maya, she's also an advisor. She's always involved in BIO. We always try to put her on board anyways. This time she was our advisor as well and wrote an article for the magazine talking about BIO especially, but biennials in general, as a platform for knowledge production. Yes, so Paulo has always a work in design, architecture, and a lot of education practice. He's also a teacher in Amsterdam, and Eindhoven, and elsewhere, and everywhere. And it's always more participatory and thinking archives a lot. That's why we place him with the museum team. And I also just was invited by MAU for participation at the Venice Architecture Biennale like 2 editions ago, not 2018 but 2016. And we are showing now at the biennial his work that he presented there, an installation that if you were at the party last night, you saw the library as his work, and he repurposed the structure of the structure of the library for our biennial because it's site-specific work. The installation has to fit the environment. The books were curated as part of that project already. Just before starting with the question, I also want to say that we are here representing 3 of our framework of the biennial. So here, as we know, in the main exhibition, we're talking like common knowledge. This is the overarching theme. Then we call it the other 2, the commission projects, open knowledge that Paulo talked about. Also, we want to hear from him how it was to work in this framework with the group and being a mentor this time. And Aljoša is part of the shared knowledge where we invited projects already, existing projects, and people applied to open calls. Was not his case. We invited him because we wanted to bring the library back to Ljubljana. But it's part of the Irish Passage, the shared knowledge section of the biennial. Yes. Do you want to ask?
Oh, yeah, I should have brought the mic.
Yeah. I asked.
See how my brain works. So, Maya, one of the obstacles that Peter Berg talked about was this, divided knowledge, specialized knowledge, and bio or biennial, in a way, introduced this production platform as a multidisciplinary process in developing new concepts. So, and you yourself as a curator working with Mao and other projects as well, you constantly also question, the purpose and the institution as well. So could you explain a bit, also including for those who are not so familiar with the bio process in general, what this actually, where it derived from and how bio contributes in a way to this opening up specialized knowledge.
Yes, if you look at Museum of Architecture and Design, it is an institution that in fact recently, in the last couple of years, has undergone quite a big transformation, and the transformation of the institution was in a way related to the transformation of the biennial format, which was in fact happened since in first time in a way in 2012, and then later with this new kind of platform for developing alternatives and questioning what design is. Biennial of Design was established in 1963, and at that time the first exhibition was done in 1964. It was a kind of educational tool. Biennial proclaimed the truth about what is good design. And of course that was very relevant at that moment, and the Biennial at that time was a very relevant event next to the Triennale of Milano, one of the rare such events in Europe at that time. But of course with the changes we heard today from industrial to post-industrial, this model simply didn't work out. So we couldn't just say what is, we couldn't just support the industrialization, the mass production, the consumerism. So we stopped at a certain point and we said, hey, what we are doing is this format goods for the time we're living. So we questioned what the design meant, what design biennial is, and also we questioned the transmission of knowledge as an institution where we used to proclaim the truth from a very authoritarian position, from a very kind of closed position, expert position of the institution, to kind of opening questions what design is, and in fact that corresponded with the transformation of Mao. And we decided to open this expertise on what design is to many multidisciplinary agents and develop a format which is developing through time. Also with every time the format is a little bit different in the sense that we have the structure of mentors, designers, non-designers that work together, and they develop then the projects together. And I think that this kind of multidisciplinary approach, also the approach that questions that in fact addresses local problematics through a kind of broader global perspective, is very important. And that we in fact create a kind of discursive platform which is not anymore a proclamation of truth, but discourse through different disciplines. And in fact through this you see a kind of transmission of knowledge through the institution or through the academia to the biennial, which becomes a kind of relevant knowledge producer.
So, you said bio in its beginning was an educational program or model, so I think this is stayed continuous in a way, because I think what we cannot exhibit in this bio is actually a process that has been done for more than 6 months in preparation for commission projects, and also our ideas and concept that evolved into an exhibition and an accompanying program. Maybe a short note on this, the production platform as a learning platform, in terms of, I mean, people come together from various backgrounds, various countries, and should deliver on time a bio contribution. Is that kind of, is that something that is also embedded in, the conception of bios? Because in your article you also have brought a thought about biennials in general and their function, rather than just, showing the latest outlet.
Yeah, we questioned, in fact, what biennial is in today's world, and as you know, the biennials are popping up like mushrooms all over the world, and they became a kind of, I would say, very efficient tool to promote cities, to promote designs, but they're very rarely critical events. And if you look at the world exhibitions and the way the biennials then later were functioning as a kind of proto-internet, today, with this abundance of information and access of information, of course, also the format becomes questionable. And to come back to your question about bringing together many disciplines and questioning the biennial, if you, to bring together this kind of multidisciplinary platform, I believe that it has the power to bring all the participants out of not only participants, designers, but also the institutions that are involved, out of their comfort zone, and through that, in fact, can put on seeds, kind of plant seeds for change that can, in fact, become quite important, as we saw from previous examples.
Good. As your way. The next question, I think, is Paulo, because of your contribution now in our exhibition, your work, Teaching Lies. We saw on the video now that Peter Berg is suggesting that what we are missing is a kind of education how to deal with this information, or like an education how we deal with our own knowledge. And your proposition for Istanbul Biennial was actually a series of workshops, and you developed a syllabus of this course called Teaching Lies. And can you talk a little bit about this work and why you decided to do this as a contribution to the Biennial there?
Yeah, so Teaching Lies is the result of many conversations that I had over maybe a couple of years with friends and colleagues that were also present during the biennial, and included Jimmy Adam from the Critical Media Lab in Basel, Rebecca Kiesewetter, presenter and writer, Donato Ricci, who's also a designer and researcher, and Benoit Jean, so those 5 or 6 person friends who routinely found themselves in the same places and enjoy talking about like design and education and the shortcomings of both. And Teaching Lies was the result of a 3-day public activity that we hosted there, and for which each of us contributed one presentation as a starting point. And so there were 7 presentations. We were 7. And each presentation then developed into a module and a syllabus for it's a real syllabus for a fake design class, or a syllabus for a studio-based class. It's articulated in that way. So I had to take note and print out because I kind of forgot the structure of the syllabus. But for example, one module was justification, how things get retroactively also made sound reasonable, making use of history and documents and archival works and how projects existed. By retro-engineering the archive and the archival process kind of debunk these narratives. Now think of the great narratives of Columbus discovering America, for example, which has been dismantled and discussed extensively in the last years, but also we can think of the narratives that surround the great moderns in design and architecture and so on. Or there was a module about calibration, so the definition of standards, common baselines, and the history behind the standards. So for example, there are shortcuts in architecture for how you should design a functional staircase. So a step has a thread, like the surface on which you step, and a riser, which is the vertical surface, and the sum of 2 times the thread and the riser has to, it has to be equal to 62, something like that. But there is for what kind of bodies is that calculation made, and our bodies are different, and now we know that. So, and there were other standards that we kind of unboxed. And other modules included encapsulations, how information or knowledge is either framed or black box into technology, for example, or projection, which is the tendency to perceive connections and meaning to support arguments. It's like a selective perception of reality to make an argument, and so on. Abstraction, for example, which is the process by which knowledge is extracted from reality, from specific situation, and often brings to generalizations, and to the definition of what is relevant and what is not, so because not everything fits into the generalization. But the school is about, the class is about like learning to live with lies also. It's not just about debunking them, it's also like learning how to design has always been also about manipulation, and also how manipulation is not necessarily a bad thing, because when you are able to see the traces of such manipulation, such distortion, then you're also, I don't know, like that kind of knowledge becomes more transparent than if it were presented as pristine. So the more manipulation and the more distortion, the better, to some extent. And the more visible they are. And the last thing, maybe, that's interesting was the self-assessment workshop that we proposed the students to do. And there, in a self-assessment procedure, self-assessment involves students in evaluating their own work and their own learning process. But of course, there are gender-specific phenomena. Women or girls tend to, there are studies that tend, but it's also empirical, tend to hide their intelligence sometimes, while we guys know it's totally fine to appear as a nerd, or even a class background plays a role. There are people coming from West background and people coming from working class background have different evaluations of their own work and different expectations and so on. So this was the
this, for example, is teaching lives for us is a perfect example how difficult it is within a design exhibition to exhibit such a conceptual work, which at the end comes as either as a video or 5 pages or 4 pages of big work. But we kept it as dry as it is, and I think out of the, I don't know how many positions we gathered in this central exhibition, around 150, I would say less than a third is objects. So that's, I think, also quite a shift from the immateriality of designed as it was before, very much product or object. But we're not going to talk about this. This is another discourse. I would like to get back to the comfort zone that Maya was talking about. You also were, it's the question to you. Since you worked as or have you been introduced as a design mentor, or maybe it was the chief knowledge officer that Peter Berg was kind of explaining what his tasks are. Maybe you could give us some insight of the process, how you delivered your final proposal for bio.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe thinking comparatively to. Okay. Yeah, I was a participant in the first renovated or rejuvenated edition of bio in was it 2014?
Yeah.
When Maya and were the curators. And since then, with that edition, and since then with the with the last two editions as well, I think bio created a unique space for itself, which is that of a laboratory where it's okay to take risks and it's okay to also fail sometimes. And as you said, it's not the difficulty, the main difficulty perhaps in staging an exhibition at the end of the process is that you need to, some things you cannot show and something you need to hide and something, I don't know, maybe broke apart, and you cannot put them on pedestal. And so it's been like that this time as well, although the process was more structured. And so maybe the first edition was more open in terms of format, and this last one involved designathons. So for Bio 26, what was new for me was the request to structure a project that was 6 months long around designathons that were 3 days long only, 2.5 to. And but this comes with a challenge, with another challenge, because designathon, like working 2 days intensively to show something, to show how also you want to present something, and committing to 6 months, for 6 months to the same project, require different skills and different motivations, different drives, and that became an epic time, I think. So I think the main, if we can say that at the end we are all satisfied with the final result, maybe the main struggle was how to deal with the fact that designathons, like having to work intensely for 2 days to show something that looks credible, that looks like it's there on the third day, and committing for 6 months through difficulties and the frictions and so on. Yeah, they're two very different things that require different skills and motivations.
But I'm happy to hear that, because that was actually the point of our biennial. Like, we introduced this concept that comes from the startup world, of the technology development nowadays. Like, we develop tech products, apps, and so on in this kind of environment. From ideation to prototype in 3 days. And this what's called sprint methodologies, we develop 5 days. And then we brought this to the cultural context, and we have to do this, and since the beginning we've been questioned about this. What about research? What about this? And they have no time to do the proper research, and so like, no, let's try it. So we did this as a methodology to decide what projects to commission. So the winners of the designathon are the groups who developed the projects for the biennial, and this was not done in 3 days. This was much longer. But we chose the projects with the jury, with lots of people involved. And Lucia Carey is with us. The designathon is here. He's invited as a consultant to help us to reach these two worlds. And yes, thank you for your insight. I think it's actually kind of great. But I want to talk now, since we talk about common knowledge and the open knowledge, I want to talk about the shared knowledge and ask Aljoša about your work with the curated library. If I'm not mistaken, your task at the time when you were invited for the Venice Architecture Biennale, the topic was dwelling, was about housing and how people live, and this is of course a huge topic in architecture, of course. And suddenly your proposition was a library, and people do not live in a library. So the connection, of course, not obvious there, it's more conceptual, and your library is curated, as I said, curated books. You actually invited different experts and professionals to share their library with you, and then you bought the books, acquired the books, and placed inside the library. So my question would be, why did you choose this approach in the first place to show books in the biennial? And second, if you have any kind of feedback of these results, or if this knowledge from these books were actually had a life outside of the library, outside of the books, how it was open and shared.
Well, to shed a bit of light on the context, when Tina Gregoric, my partner, and myself were invited to be curating the Slovenian Pavilion for the 2016 Architectural Biennale, we had to respond to Alejandro Saravena's question. As he, being the chief curator, he asked everybody to, in a way, report from our front as architects. So one line of thinking was that our front, a bit relating also to the work in our architectural office that we do, because we take on board quite a few collective affordable housing projects. But on the other side, also thinking what defines the most of our built environment. And if you look around, these are structures of dwelling since ever, right? So the topic of home and dwelling is a very important topic in architecture. I think you might kind of place it quite high or on the top, very much parallel to the open public space, which is another very huge topic, right? So we definitely wanted to kind of react and report from the topic of addressing what is home and dwelling today. Although this topic has been questioned and re-questioned throughout the history so many times, and it's been constantly kind of looked at and assessed and discussed and so on, we thought right now, when we are living in an environment kind of completely intertwined with fluid information, and also in a society where everybody moves so frequently, right? Either they are day-to-day commuters, or they are people who are actually moving their homes for permanent relocation, or they are based in several continents, as you mentioned before, and so on. We thought it would be worth to kind of readdress and have another look from contemporary perspective of what the topic of home and dwelling is. So we tried to kind of step around beyond the national border. So we invited 27 professionals. They are not only architects, of course, but architects, designers, as they define our domestic environment quite in a high degree with designing all the objects that surround us, writers, curators, people who are having their knowledge quite thoroughly assessed towards this topic. So we invited 27 people also from very different parts of the world, from South America to Japan, in order to also kind of have a different perspective for different contexts. So everybody proposed roughly 10 books that, according to their knowledge, speak best about the topic of home and dwelling, either from their own personal perspective of their professional expertise, or from their context or home environment in which they are living and working. So we ended up with a collection, a curated library of roughly 250 books that we have acquired, and we have kind of given that set of books to display for people of visitors of Biennale to either have a glimpse or to spend there maybe like a couple of hours in order to kind of research in this body of content. So the library was in a way one reason why we wanted to do it this way, because we also kind of set up this as our research project. So we wanted also to learn through being curators of the Slovenian pavilion. But on the other hand, we also wanted to kind of create a body of knowledge that we could, after everything kind of ends up and the lights switched off in Venice, we could kind of come back to here to the museum or back in our home environment and be to the value and access to the people who are addressing these issues here. Maybe the biggest group of people who are going to be interested in these images are the architecture and design students. But it also has a personal relationship, because the first thing we have asked ourselves is what was defining our home. And when we were moving from London, where we've done our master's degrees over there, back home to Ljubljana, we understood that we literally moved home at the point when we kind of shipped our books with us back here. So in a way, our personal relationship with the home environment, it is library. So in a way, it kind of represents, it physically represents the knowledge that you are in a way getting into. So that brings us to another topic, is how you in a way materialize knowledge. And I think one of the subtones of the project that we were producing, it is also that the book, it might still be the most relevant piece of information that you might find. Especially, again, very much important in relation to the architecture and design students, where they quite quickly and thoroughly relate and rely only to very superficial acquirement of information through the net. And I'm not against Wikipedia, I think that's a fantastic platform, but that's not enough. So in a way, you have to kind of develop your critical attitude towards getting information and reacting to it. So we thought if we kind of reintroduce the book as an object that it has been edited and kind of created a filter of how this information becomes public through printing, distribution, that might still be something that you have to make students understand that this is the information that is relevant. So to answer the last part of the question is that the books have been now transferred to space in Aljoša Dekleva, which is a fantastic opportunity, so they are kind of being put back in public. But in the meantime, they were at our office where we kind of researched the content of these books and what they mean in order to put them in another publication, which we are kind of finishing right about now, and will be issued within the year 26, so we can make a launch, where we kind of process all this information, how to, in a way, arrange those books in relationships, so how to cross-references, to see who proposed which set of books, where the people who have been proposing the books overlap. And I think that's another piece of information which is going to share another piece of knowledge which is covering the whole collection of those books. But maybe just one more important thing is that at the Biennale, as an exhibition which is a temporary thing, you can only get as much knowledge and information as you can spend time in that specific piece. So to overcome this kind of problem, we also produced this very small booklet, which contains the concept of the project, but most importantly, it contains all the lists of the books to different people that have been proposing. And that's something that everybody that was visiting the exhibition, the people also that are visiting the exhibition right now here, they can take home as simply a piece of knowledge for their own use in larger amount of time.
Thank you, Aljoša, for this introduction to your project, and I think it also gave quite good links to our exhibition, where we also celebrate the book as an object. This is why we see quite a few books upstairs, and I think it also refers to where we started this evening, also in reflection on Victor Papanek's thoughts, whose main contribution was not just his thought, but it was also a book. And the book became itself kind of a value or an object in itself, designed for the real world. So thank you very much. Thank the three of you for sharing your knowledge, also representing the three pillars of our bio, the common knowledge, the open knowledge, and the shared knowledge format. So thank you very much. I think that's it. So yeah, I think that was the first talk in a series of 4. The next talk is going to take place on December 6th and will address information. So also the idea is that with each talk we distribute one of our magazines. So Information Crisis is out, Common Knowledge, and the other is gonna come out soon. The other dates also I think should be important to put down in your calendars. It's January 17 and February 6 or 7, I think. But anyway, it's announced on the bio website. Thank you for coming and joining us for this talk. Now at 7 we're having a walk and talk through the central exhibition here in Mao. So please join us. And yeah, we kind of report from the front of design, information crisis. Thank you.